document that I sent to you yesterday, which is the June 27th draft of the STR. It includes both the draft report to the town council, as well as two proposals for a draft STR ordinance. And again, the first one would include the ability of the town to register STRs, assuming the state does not prohibit that. The second one would be a proposal assuming the state prohibits us from registering STRs. At this point, the House bill is still in Senate committee, and the legislative session is getting short, so that may in fact not pass this year. We may continue to have the ability to register STRs. With that, let's turn to the issues that we're trying to deal with. The first would be defining STRs as a rental under 30 days in the R2 and R2A zoning districts. Preston, does that cover what we need to cover? I mean, the 2 and the 2A zoning districts would be the ones where we have the residential STRs currently. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, there may be some in the R1. I'd have to kind of do some.
Now, the R1 would be what?
R1 is more larger lots. Typically, it's an acre-sized lot. There's some R1 on top up near Oz Road. It's on some of the periphery of the town as well.
Would it be easier just to add the R1 into the definition? I mean, is there any reason to exclude the R1?
I don't think there's any reason to exclude it
Okay.
unless you have a preference not to. I mean, they are larger lots, so they're typically spaced further apart, but they are generally larger houses as well.
Okay, but obviously the hotels that we have are in the commercial district.
Yeah, or commercial.
And so we don't have to worry about that. All right.
The sentence above your highlight there needs a little clearing. After the comma there, it's just a disjointed sentence.
The zoning ordinance is on.
It says, however, the zoning ordinance does not further define the STR, but
Right.
the occupancy tax section of the ordinance as any rental under 12 months. It's just a,
Yeah, because that's not in the zoning ordinance, so I'll need to correct that.
well, no, it's just the sentence isn't a complete sentence is all. It's disjointed.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Just a slight edit.
Yeah, I'll fix that. But right now, as I understand our ordinances, the occupancy tax requirement is any rental under 12 months, and so there is a disconnect, right?
Yes, there is. I think occupancy tax listed as is the shorter period, and then our zoning ordinance listed as a vacation rental, which is a sort of a state definition.
All right, so we'll need to clarify that. Okay, so we'll clarify that. Last time we were talking, the town was looking at entering into a contract with one of these companies, AirDNA, to try to come up with an initial list of Airbnb and VRBOs. And Bob, can you give us an update on?
We have executed that contract. They're scraping the data. We've got a custom report that's going to give us some historical data that we can compare to occupancy tax revenues to see if where the town stands on identifying the total number of STRs in the town. And that report's due in, I think, 10 days.
So we will have it before our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Now, but as I understand it, as we discussed previously, they are not going to be able to give us addresses of every STR on the mountain.
That's correct. This is going to be an aggregate report, historical. We're going to compare it to what we do know, our reported occupancy tax. If the two are similar, we know that we've got a pretty good handle on the total number of STRs. If there's a discrepancy in either way, we'll know that there needs to be additional work to identify those.
So how are we going to, are we getting any further along in trying to figure out how we're going to come up with a list? Let's say we get 700 of these things.
Well, we think there's 700 roughly, and the occupancy tax numbers bear that out. So if this historical data comes back and roughly there's 700 occupancies based on the occupancy tax that we brought in, we'll know then that we've got a pretty good idea of what the numbers are. The letter we discussed last meeting is going out, it's out in the utility bill. And then, of course, with if the town is permitted to register the STRs, then that would be the key to do a townwide notification, education piece for STRs. If we're not allowed to permit those, it's going to be far more difficult to accomplish that task.
But in here, do you agree that the fire ordinance part, we can continue to require them to file that affidavit even if the state prohibits us from registering STRs?
Yes.
Okay, so we still have that piece.
We do, and that is part and parcel to the letter that's gone out.
Okay,
Letting everyone in the town know whether they're STR or not, that that's a requirement. And last time we did that, we had some
reporting.
reporting, and we'll increase that list.
Is the council moving forward to do a town hall on garbage
Yes.
this summer?
It'll be August 17th.
Could we think about adding some information about this to that town hall?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand. The town hall on trash
It's
is
part
going
of
to talk about the STRs and the bare bin requirements and the inability to use the convenience center for garbage. So I think that all goes together, and the answer is yes.
Okay, so we can add an informational section to that town hall and publicize that as giving it information to people who are engaged in short-term rentals, that we have information that they would be interested in if they would come to the town hall.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Sort of related to that, and it's unrelated to this, but Leslie was just telling me she found on Facebook somebody's maybe trying to create a business of picking up trash. Have you seen that?
Yeah, there's been a number of portable signs that have been put around town for a trash pickup company. Currently, the town is entered into an exclusive franchise for commercial with the Republic. So if this entity is considering commercial trash, that would be in violation of the franchise. If it's single family, it's not.
But what's the advantage?
I
Don't know.
I'm not sure how that business model works. When you're already paying the town for your trash, why would you pay someone in addition to take your trash? And pick it up at the curb.
And they wouldn't be allowed to dump it
They would not.
I mean, they'd have to take it off the mountain
They
somewhere.
have to go to a landfill to do it legally.
Yeah. Okay, so we are moving forward to try to get a list of STRs, and right now we still have the two proposed ordinances depending on which way the state goes on that. Have you heard anything further about why that bill is stuck in committee or
Tremendous amount of pushback
from the towns?
From towns and local governments.
Good, okay. And the town was able to send its opposition based on our recommendation, correct?
They passed a resolution and it's been signed and sent off. We've made numerous phone calls, participated with the league. You never can tell what happens in the 11th hour in Raleigh. So, right now it's in committee.
Okay. On the last paragraph, we talked about the family season pass for registered STRs. The suggestion from Sandy through the TDA was that they thought a lottery might make more sense to provide an incentive, a drawing of some sort. That's one other possibility is.
Have to find out what the legality is of the drawing of calling it a lottery. A drawing is one thing, but calling it a lottery, I know that there's some legal implications for calling
Drawing.
anything a
Drawing.
lottery in the United States.
drawing for what? For permits for STR?
Well, if they register, they enter a drawing and they would gain
It's an incentive.
some financial incentive to gain from voluntarily registering with the town.
Yeah.
And that's one pot. And maybe we just leave it to the council to pick what the incentive would be, but we suggest various incentives that could be funded through occupancy tax dollars.
Right, and the consequences?
The consequence, you mean of failing to register?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, they're
we've
still
got
there. It's $100, what's the fine?
100 and for the fire and 10 a day for their 10
Yeah.
for the,
I mean,
the
it's-
register, so
the-
we've got two.
Those are already in the existing ordinances.
Right, but enforcement of that is,
That's just, I mean, that's out of our,
do we just leave that up to council?
that's out of our control.
Yeah.
All we can do is make the recommendation,
Yeah,
and it's up to the town to figure out how to enforce what's already on the books.
I think we should make a recommendation that we have some enforcement mechanism, whether it be the town hire an enforcement officer or something similar to that. I don't think that the cops
Yeah,
want anything to do with this.
code enforcement, yeah.
Code enforcement,
That's
yeah.
basically what the individuals call code enforcement.
Otherwise, I just don't see, how these guys ever, ever have a consequence. It's the same for, the noise stuff, the trash stuff. I mean, we can put a thing up in the house and say, please don't do this and that, but if you don't say $500 fine for shooting fireworks, out of season, or,
Yeah,
something like that, I feel like that'd be helpful in there.
Well, I mean, the real issue is enforcement, and
Yeah.
maybe Preston, you can address and again, it goes back to the issue, unless we have a list of who is in compliance and who is not in compliance, we can't even start on the enforcement. So would the enforcement be through your office?
Yeah, part of it would be for sure, and it depends on how, if we come up with some zoning regulations for that, things like noise are typically handled by the police department. Animals are typically handled by the police department, but
and fireworks and firearms have to
parking
be.
is another one.
Well, I'm just talking about what's already on the books. I mean, right now, there's a requirement that every STR register with the town.
Mhm.
So how are we, and if we tell the council, we believe this needs to be enforced,
Mhm.
it's already on the books. So how do we go forward? How mechanically who's going to be responsible for enforcing it? And how are we going to do that?
That would probably be a decision by town manager and council to decide how they want to enforce it.
Town manager?
To answer your question, it falls under the planning. That particular piece, that's a planning and zoning. So if the town chose to enforce that in some method, it would be through planning and zoning. Some of the other things you've talked about, Preston is correct, other departments.
Sure, and but I'm talking
The
about,
registering of the STR
Yeah.
would fall under planning.
and then the fire one would still fall under the fire department.
Actually, the ordinance requires that to go through the planning and zoning department.
Okay. So basically, all we can do is make a recommendation to council that we believe this needs to be enforced.
Sure.
And we are going to rely on Preston to do it. That's what it sounds like. But it sounds like all we can do is recommend to council that they actually move forward and start to enforce it.
And I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. And that's what I think we're already doing in this, and I think we'll just have to emphasize that.
I just wanted some discussion of it because, we can tell these guys, you need to have an agent to respond
Oh, I
within 5
agree.
minutes, but if they don't, or what if the agent doesn't come,
Well, but I mean, my fundamental problem with all of this is still, until we have an actual list,
Sure.
we're,
First
yelling at the
things
wind, basically. So, all right, well, let's talk about the next section, which is where we do need to make some decisions, which is the occupancy limit part. And based on our last discussion, we basically came up with 3 possible alternatives. And so the question is, do we want to make a recommendation as to which of these 3 we think is the way that the council should go, or do we simply leave it up to them? And again, so everybody knows what we're talking about, the 3 possibilities are an occupancy cap of 3 times the number of bathrooms with children under 5 exempt, or an occupancy cap of 2 times the number of bedrooms plus 2 people with children under 5 exempt, or a limit of 1 person per 200 feet of living space, or 1 person per 50 feet of bedroom space with children under 5 exempt. I mean, there's different ways to do it. So, Preston, do you have any particular suggestions to us as to which one of these makes the most sense? Is there one that's easier to enforce? Do we simply leave it up to the council to decide? Let's start with your suggestions and let's hear from the rest of the planning board.
Well, I would, for enforcement purposes, I would think that the bathrooms, basing it on bathrooms or total square footage would be the easier way to go about it. Basing it on bedroom square footage, deciding what's a bedroom and what's sleeping space or a living room with a pull-out bed, or what that might get into a little more challenge and argument with the renter or the STR operator.
And I think that's sort of what we talked about last time, which is we ended up discussing what's a bedroom. And a bedroom could be pretty hard to define, and a bathroom, I think, is easier.
Yeah.
Well, the bathroom follows along with your statement that there's a potential risk to the septic and the water systems. If you're counting it by that, it ties to it for legal issues. Should somebody come back later and says these are two disjointed areas, you're saying you've got sewer problems, but you're counting it by bathroom or by bedrooms, versus you're saying you have sewer problems and you're counting it by bathrooms. Now you're not disjointed for any potential legal action. That's the only reason I brought that up, was the bathrooms is the potential.
Well, I think it's, in a bath, the only other thing with the bath, it would obviously have to include a half bath. If it has a toilet, that's
Yes.
where it got into that's what has to be listed to get a septic permit, for example.
How
I
are,
thought,
how are the historical building permits in town? Do we have records of all the building permits that have been issued in town?
No, we keep them for 7 years, and then typically they're destroyed after that.
Right, so,
I think-
I agree.
but I thought bedrooms were
Are they
required to have a
microfiched or
closet.
anything?
No.
There's no
No,
retention.
I don't
in
think
it.
so.
Okay.
now we burn them in fire.
I know.
Yeah.
A bedroom, there's no definition in
I
the
thought the
zoning.
definition of a bedroom had a closet.
But that's not a zoning definition.
It's not. It used to be,
Because you
that
can
had
just
a
have
closet,
one.
it was a bedroom, but there's no standard definition. The building code defines it as if they call it a bedroom on plans. So,
The
Yeah.
the Realtors Association has very specific
Yes.
criteria. It's very clear cut.
You have to have a closet in order for it to be considered a bedroom. Well, in South Carolina, that could be different
I
here.
don't think I think it has to do with like the ceiling height and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
It has something to do with it. But the other thing was the septic permits. I tried to read the septic permit for my house, and it's like barely legible. The copy that they had on file that they gave to me. So, I don't know how good those records are either.
So did you go to Avery County?
I had it in
In file?
early on. Yeah, I don't even know. It's Watauga, but that's another Watauga and Avery.
Well, the last alternative is simply to place a hard occupancy cap. Period. Regardless of house size.
And that's where it hits the large ones, like the R1s, you're saying 1 acre, they could have, 5,600 square foot home versus a 454 square foot home. And you put a hard occupancy cap based on 10 down here, but up there, they could easily hold 15 to 20. The question comes is where and what is our justification for that hard occupancy cap, and can we legally stand on it?
Maybe we have an occupancy cap, and if you'd like to go above it, then it's on you to show us that you have the facilities to accommodate the additional people. We treat it as a variance or an exemption.
Because I noticed that loft space is also included in
Yeah.
square footage.
There's a
Some
lot
of
of
the
that.
Like the loft space at our place, we're taking the loft out, but you can't completely stand up in it, but that's still considered part of the square footage of the home.
I've got a loft that you can stand up in, and the ceiling's huge, but it's not considered a bedroom.
That's how mine is too. We use it.
Yeah, they still use it.
And it has a full bathroom as well up there.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that could be part of the.
So are we,
But if you have a hard occupancy of 6, 8, 10 people, we're thinking more like 10 people, I believe.
right.
Then that's not going to be an issue most of the time, I would imagine. Like,
Well, we
you know,
have
having them
some.
come in and prove
We have some that are advertising much larger than that, though.
that it sleeps 20 and that sort of thing.
And those are gonna be the problem.
Well, then wouldn't it be best to do it by square footage?
That's what I was just thinking, occupancy per square foot, 1,000 square foot can have a maximum of, up to 2,000 can have a maximum of,
But that doesn't,
3,000 a maximum
that
of.
doesn't correlate with bedrooms and bathrooms.
No, it doesn't.
Does
That's,
not.
that's why I used the bathrooms and looked at that myself and saying bathrooms and half baths seems to be the best option.
Which one, from the staff's perspective, which one is easier to enforce?
Of the bathrooms. or
Well,
total
of
square footage?
bathrooms, total square footage, hard cap, some other idea that we haven't thought of?
They're all gonna be challenging, you know. How are we gonna know, I guess that we could see what they're advertising, but,
Right.
to gain access, you know, it's gonna be challenging, but I think if we either a set amount or based on square footage, that we can figure that out pretty quickly. And then, try to determine how many people are sleeping there.
So if this,
Not just over for a visit.
Yeah, it's mostly after the fact when you show up because of some violation and you find somebody. It's not for preventive other than for advertisement, because a family can show up with 5 extra people that you don't know about and that the STR owner doesn't know about, and somebody showed up there. It is only after the fact that you would find that, where you walk into the place and now there's, hey, wait, you've got 5 people too many.
Well, that's the other, that's the other problem. The owner might not even know.
Correct.
Yeah.
so
That's
enforcement,
where that's where the fines come in, and the owner will be more attentive after a couple of fines.
Correct.
and
I
enforcement
would
is the
think so.
issue. And in South Carolina, we didn't have a legislature trying to tell us not to craft an ordinance, so what we did is we did a permit system where everybody got a permit had a number, and that number had to be displayed on the listing, so it makes it easier for y'all to correlate, you know, the permit to what's actually being advertised. But, you know, I guess a scraper like AirDNA could go through there. Do you know if they've got the capability to say, okay, tell us who's advertising as a 3-bedroom? I mean, it breaks them down into that sort of granular detail, doesn't it?
I didn't see that.
Well, if they did, if they did, then we could say everyone who's advertising more than, you know, 10 occupancy or 8 or 6, then we need to take a closer look at these, maybe. Would that be easier? I mean, make it easier?
Yeah, I certainly would, you know.
Wouldn't the, going by the bathroom issue, address, in my mind, it's gonna address the septic.
Right.
It's also probably gonna address the parking
Right.
directly. Whereas
Water and sewer.
bedroom issues, pull-out couches, air mattresses, everything else is gonna, it's not as easy to control as the bathroom.
I mean, I think we need to junk the bedrooms as a possibility. I
Yeah.
think the consensus seems to be bedrooms too hard to define. It's too easy to
You can better
evade.
justify the bathrooms.
Right.
If people were to call you back on it, you could,
So
you could come
bathrooms-
back with that.
Bob, from a fire safety point of view, do you have any preference on any of this stuff, or any idea on, you know, what sort of cap should be, or how to navigate that?
Well, in North Carolina, the fire code specifically exempts 1 and 2 family dwellings. So there is no fire code that's enforceable on 1 and 2 family dwellings.
Right.
So that's what the law is in North Carolina. Obviously, putting 42 people in a single-family home isn't fire safe.
Down in
That's-
Nags Head.
That's not legal, that's, observational. The only comment I have on bathrooms versus square footage is we can count both. It's easy to count a bathroom as opposed to a bedroom.
Right.
Square footage, the comment about you can have we have huge short-term rentals, 3-4 stories that are a lot of square footage. There's very few bathrooms. So, keep that in mind.
So bathrooms might be, is it, from your perspective, is it better for us to make a single recommendation to council or give council options as to which way they choose to regulate?
Could we do a planning workshop with them? Is that something that would be helpful?
I don't know if they'd be interested.
You can also put it forth as a recommendation of use of bathrooms, however other considerations may include.
Well, that's what I was gonna put in anyway. I was gonna go through why we've rejected other possibilities, and maybe do the bathrooms and the square footage as the two. But then, does anybody have a feeling that they like the hard cap as opposed to doing a cap based on the number of bathrooms or square footage? Let's talk about that as the alternative first. Does the hard cap make any more sense than the other two? Or is it too?
If you put a hard cap, does that mean that in a 454 square foot home, I can have 10 people listed because, or 10 people staying there because the hard cap is 10?
Well, there you go, that's the problem.
I feel like a hard cap should max at like 6 people. Other than that, like we need to see that you've got enough bathrooms to accommodate, you've got enough square footage or whatever.
And then that's when you put
decide.
in additional layers though. How many more layers do you put in when you put that hard
Yeah,
cap
it
on?
gets really complicated when you start doing that. We need to figure out something simple and enforceable.
The old KISS rule, short and simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just see it as being too random, you know, it's just, we picked this as the hard cap, and then you got homes that are 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, and you're limiting it to 8 people, it doesn't seem right. So that was-
Arbitrary and capricious.
yeah.
What are you feeling? You care?
I mean, I do care. I mean, I like the bathroom just because it does affect the septic system and it has a bigger overall effect on the mountain in general. When you have, I mean, like I know when we bought the house, like although I have a loft that has a full bathroom, it wasn't considered a bedroom, but yet they had a permit when they built the house for 3-bedroom septic system. So.
Which includes that space.
Correct. So, I mean, like, direct effect on the mountain itself, water-wise or sewer-wise, would be
That's amazing.
that. So, in my opinion, that would be the most important impact on the mountain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, do I get the sense that everybody, bathrooms would be our preference, but we will give the alternatives, the other two alternatives to council, the same. We also considered a hard occupancy cap, and we also considered a square footage, but we rejected those for various reasons. Is that the best way to
Yeah.
approach it? Okay.
Yeah, as far
That
as
was
counting the
shows the
bathrooms.
considerations. Yeah, that we, the discussion was there and the consideration was there.
To give them
It just-
options.
Yeah, lets them know what the thought process was.
Right, but as far as counting the bathrooms go, you say bathrooms
Anything with a toilet?
in existence. I mean, we can't say listed, I mean, we can say listed on the building permit, but, you know, we've got 7 years of building permits. so-
Well, I guess bathrooms in existence, yeah.
Yeah,
How many,
I mean,
yeah.
that's sort of assumed in the answer, I guess.
but, yeah.
Urs, if you would consider permitted or permittable bathrooms.
Yeah.
We have some structures
I
that
was just gonna
have
ask that.
bathrooms in their basement, don't permit it, and we don't want that to be an issue.
I was just gonna ask that question, so,
find
exactly, I
out
mean,
when it's
if you add a bathroom, a legal bathroom to a structure, you have to have a permit for it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But there are people who have added illegal bathrooms. Okay, so we'll add it, permitted bathrooms. And that would include a half bath, anything with a toilet would be.
How far back do our permittings go? You said 7 years?
Yes.
So if it was put on prior to 7 years ago without a permit, and somebody was to buy that house, but it was already, MLS already had it listed as a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, even though it was one illegal bathroom from 10 years ago, there'd be no way of catching that.
Typically, the way it's called is the tax assessor has it based as a certain number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and that sort of thing. And when we permit something, they get a copy of those, so they adjust their taxable values and all that. So when something's sold or transferred, we get an email from them saying, hey, do we have a permit for X, Y, Z? Because they're listing it as 4 bedrooms, we have this 3, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay,
They catch that stuff.
so it's
yeah.
caught.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's
They
it.
look through the listings I get emails all the time.
Yeah. Smart.
That's what I was wondering.
Especially right now,
Is
there's
it
a lot of emails.
Is it Avery and Watauga? that are
More so
doing it?
Watauga, but Avery
Watauga's
does
better.
as well. Avery does it more yearly, Watauga goes to it monthly, I think, and
Well, they probably have good records then. Should we get in touch with Watauga and Avery and talk, maybe have I can do that or something else?
Well, it's good record as far as,
As far as the septic permitting and how many bathrooms.
How
are
many bathrooms,
permitted,
yeah.
Yeah,
I guess one way, but again, our biggest problem right now is identifying the addresses of
sure.
The ones we
But this
need
is
to
important. yeah.
identify.
Speaking on that, has the town ever done a survey of all homeowners? I'm thinking, we're talking about registering and whether that's legal or not, but can there be a survey, and part of that survey is how do you use your home? And it's not the only part of the survey, but it's buried in the survey. And I know surveys, not everyone returns them and all that kind of thing. But would that help in generating a list of people that are using it for, second homes and people that are using it for rental properties?
It's been a while since the town did any kind of survey, and the last survey they did was anonymous.
Yeah, I would
Most
almost think you'd
surveys
have to be
are
an anonymous double blind, so that
That's-
you did not know who was
That's the
responding,
problem.
so that you could get an overall feel for it, but I don't think you could go beyond an anonymous double blind. And the double blind means that the people who send it out aren't the same people who are receiving them back and doing the counting. It's a blind on who sends it out and blind on who sends it back. And there's nothing on the survey itself that would identify a particular area, a particular homeowner, or particular anything like that.
I mean, you could do it differently, but I suspect
Yeah.
you'd get a pretty low.
And then
response
advertising that on
rate.
that it's a double-blind survey, that it's just for information, it's to provide information to which it is, it's providing data and information to the city to make future plans with.
Unless you put a prize to, unless you're gonna do your,
I mean, I think the better option is still to do what we're doing now, which is to inform the people who are doing it that they have a legal obligation right now to register. And we're never gonna pick them all up. Let's move to the parking issue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question, Preston, do we have a process for an after-the-fact permit for something like a bathroom? Like if someone comes in, they have a permit for, I guess they were originally permitted for 2, and they come in and build one after the fact, or is it tied to the septic, so if they built it, they need to take it down?
I don't think that we have necessarily have a process in place. I know that we have done some permits where something was constructed and they wanted to see if it was built properly or something. We permitted it and inspected it, but a lot of times with bathrooms and that sort of thing, everything's covered up and we can't really see what happened with the plumbing, and we don't know what the electrical is doing, so
It'd be hard to issue.
it's tough to kind of after the fact permit anything. But like decks, we've done those before where somebody added a deck or something and didn't get a permit for it, and we had to go in and do some back fees and that sort of thing.
So it's an inspection issue, you can't inspect the plumbing because it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my plumbing was not installed according to any code, and one of mine has a 3/8" drop on it per foot, and the most you can go is a 1/4 inch per foot, so it's having plumbing problems, and I measured, and it's very easy to see that, so I have to tear out my walls, and when I tear off, not the walls, they only have paneling on it, not anything else, but I'll tear out all the paneling in my house, and then I'll have the plumber, the architect come in and draw it, and then the plumber come in and do it properly, and then the city can inspect it, but that's a different process than most people would be willing to go through when I'm refurbishing the whole house because it's 50 years old, so. But yeah, the city can't see the type of wiring that's in the background, anything like that. My house was not built very well, but it was approved apparently.
Let's move to parking. The problem that I see with parking is that we are talking about basing parking on number of bedrooms, so we're back to the bedroom problem. But what's interesting about that is the current ordinance uses bedrooms as well.
Parking is just another net, just another filter really.
No, I know, but if we choose to make a more stringent parking requirement for STRs, what do we base the number of parking spaces on? Since we have the bedroom definition problem, are we going to change that? Are we going to keep it with how does the town currently use the bedroom requirement in parking spaces? I mean, you're going on what's on the building plans again.
Yes. Yeah.
If they put in 3 bedrooms in the plan, the number of parking spaces are based on the number of bedrooms in the plan.
Yes.
Okay. So where do we go with parking spaces? Do we keep it 2 parking spaces for each, 2 bedrooms and additional parking space for each additional bedroom, or do we do something different?
I think we would just say not to exceed the parking that is there to accommodate the amount of guests. So if you have an occupancy of, if you want an occupancy of 10 and you have, say, the right to it based off of your bathrooms, but you've only got parking for, say, 8 people, then you can have an STR for 8 people. You can only park on your property, right? You can't
Like
park on the
parking should
street.
trump a bathroom.
Right, that's what I'm saying, it's another filter, again, the same thing in Charleston, like, there were plenty of houses that could accommodate 6 people, but if you didn't have, 2 maneuverable parking spots, you can have an STR at all. That's how they did it there, because the parking's such an issue. I mean, it's an issue here as well, so.
How
Now,
do
just
we-
a statement that says that the owner, the STR owner is the person who must comply, is a required person to comply, or they're required to comply with the current parking, because we can never tell, you got a place that can hold 10, one person shows up, yeah.
That's the
They're
agent.
required
That's
to
what
no on-street parking. It's just simple as that.
Yeah.
No on-street parking.
So simply state that the owner is required to provide enough parking for all
Yeah.
Yeah.
occupants
To
and leave it
or to limit the number of cars.
to
per
the
their
number of
park. Yeah,
spaces.
That's their
So this-
requirement, and then the enforcement takes over the rest, whereas we don't have to say 2 or 3 or anything. Is
Yeah.
that you're required to address your parking issues. If they're not in compliance, then the city takes care of it from there.
And it's already tied to the building permit too,
Yeah.
so that's.
I mean, I'm happy,
And
does
that's
that
not
make sense to you?
Uh,
Is that an easier way to do it?
Yeah, I think it is, because now I think that the police has to ticket the car that's in violation. I think holding the property owner responsible would, if we could find them, I think it would alleviate, they could make sure that their renters are aware that there's only 3 spaces
Yeah.
available, or
It's
don't bring 12 cars. 'cause
sleeps
they're not
10,
gonna
2
fit.
parking spaces
There's always-
available. How difficult is that to
And
put on
that's
there?
for everybody, that's not just for
Yeah.
short-term rentals, that's for
Absolutely.
homeowners.
It's homeowners,
It's just a
Exactly,
blanket
right.
statement.
Yeah.
Because that issue is so vast all over the mountain.
Yeah.
Like just on Pond Creek Road, like literally, especially in the wintertime,
Right.
and it's snowing, I'm almost in a ditch trying to get around people. Like the house a couple doors down from me has 5 bedrooms, but then only parking for like 3 cars. So they're always in the middle of the road, and it's that way. I'd say over 50% of the mountain, I would say, does not have adequate parking for what they're
Yeah.
advertising their bedrooms as.
We need to talk about that.
And it's a vast issue.
Well, but that's easy to restructure. Simply put, make the statement that the STR owner is required to have sufficient parking spaces for the people that he or she rents to. And then it's up to the police or whoever, they can continue to enforce the parking ordinance if you park somewhere other than in a designated parking space. We've got them on my street right now. There's a house that's being rented this whole summer, and they don't have enough parking. So there's always vehicles that are partially parked in the road, and it's a narrow road. And so that person, it puts the burden on the owner, but I guess the question is, what is the sanction for the owner? Because the people who are going to get ticketed are
Yeah.
the renters.
The ticket's gonna go right onto the car,
Right,
and so that it puts them in violation.
correct.
And then I know like over there, like around Skiway Circle, Snowplow, all those condominium complexes there is not one single one of those complexes that has 2 parking spaces per unit. I don't think that if you went through, there's probably like 8 condominium complexes in that one small area, and there's just not enough parking. We have that issue at Winded Hamlet. My dad has a place there, and there's 9 units, and there are definitely not 18 parking spaces. And people will call, like owners will call just livid about someone parked in front of their unit, or, I mean, there's just no way to control that. People, they're not marked and there's not enough room.
So the cars that are illegally parked, they get ticketed, obviously. Do we want to add an additional sanction, though, for how far do you want to go to make the owner of
It's
the
impossible.
STR responsible?
It's impossible to enforce, but if
You don't-
if I rented an STR.
Right.
And I was told there was parking and there wasn't, and I parked on the street and I got a ticket, tell you what, I give them a bad review, it probably wouldn't go
Right.
back.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it's gonna get to the
Right.
owner.
If I rent a
Yeah.
4-bedroom house from you,
That-
and there's 8 of us, we're in compliance people-wise, but there's 4 couples that all rent this house together, and there's parking for 2 cars.
2 cars.
Fine, so, I mean, is
Okay.
do we have a solution for those people that do want to continue to rent their places out, that clearly don't have adequate parking? Is there, parking off mountain? I mean, we're really creating new business here. We're creating agents, who are gonna have to work.
Yes, there's
Yeah.
shortly going to be a parking lot in town across from.
No, at the bottom of the hill.
I will tell you-
Like,
No, we're
out
gonna-
of town.
No, we're gonna have
Yeah, and across the street,
there's a parking lot going in across the street, a town parking lot.
right across from Fred's.
Oh, I didn't know.
Well, I would tell you, like,
$1 an hour.
in the wintertime,
That's cheap.
in the wintertime at the resort, I
That's
promise
dirt
you,
cheap.
we get calls every day about people asking, like, oh, I'm renting a place and I don't have room. Can we park in your parking lot every night? Can we
Right.
leave our car here?
I assume the answer is no.
The answer is always no. Every morning, do we find cars and
Yes.
random people camping? Yes.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Is there a way, now this is obviously if they're registered, then at the end of the year, we can take a look and say, hey, you got 3 tickets issued to your STRs that were staying here, your people that were renting here, and at that point in time, something could be done, potentially saying that you're getting considerable number of tickets,
There's no way to know.
but
Well, but that's something we
that's
can
if
do
we have
without
a
putting
listing
it
of
in.
STRs, then we can compare it to tickets, but right now, we don't have that listing of
But that
STRs.
doesn't need to be in the regulation. I mean, that would just be, they could pull because when they write the ticket, they write it based on an address as well.
It's just speculative to say that just because the car was parked in front of the house, I'm just saying.
Well-
Well, they're gonna put the address, yeah, and it could come back that, hey, they were 3 doors down, they were just using this area. Okay, good explanation. It's
Sure.
taken care of and it's
I
over.
mean, if they're parked in the driveway and half the car is hanging out,
Which is mine next door, the ones next door is they can't get in and the snow plows have almost taken off bumpers. They have
Okay,
nicked
well,
a few.
I will make the change on we'll make the change on the parking to basically make it it's the owner's responsibility to provide adequate parking for the number of renters that they expect, or something.
So basically city ordinances.
What's the fine for parking on the road?
$50.
Oh, per day, I guess. Okay. And
How
this is-
often can they issue the violation, like once an hour?
No.
Oh, man.
And the cops feel overwhelmed with this, I would imagine, in the height of the season, so this would be another good thing for a code enforcement person to do, maybe?
Well, just remember that the town can't write a parking violation on private property, and that's where
Right.
most of the violations occur. So.
Private roads?
At Wyndham Hamlet.
Yeah.
So we get called because they're parking improperly. We cannot write a citation in Wyndham Hamlet's parking lot.
Wyndham Hamlet is a homeowners association?
I'm actually the president of that homeowner association.
Right, so you guys can give,
So you have to handle it.
And they call me a lot, like, especially like Unit 1, because it's,
Well, they call us.
Yeah.
We tell them we can't do anything.
yeah, well, that's why I tell them to call you, because they call me, and then there's 2 private homes there, closest to Unit 1. And so one of the owners is very irate and happens to have my phone number and will text me like constantly about like trash, but none of those units are short-term rentals. No one short-term rents over there. So, like,
Well, it
I'll know
just-
that it's empty and the trash could
With
come from
parking,
anywhere.
it's important to note that the town enforces parking on public property. Right, not on the right of way, but on the road itself. So in your case, Urs, we can write a ticket for that. Parking in someone's parking area, we cannot.
well, that's their responsibility. They can do all sorts, they can tow.
HOAs can tow, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
the
it's
private
overwhelming.
property owner can tow, they can't ticket, obviously.
No,
Yeah.
but
So,
Towing
and
is
our policy.
worse
is
than a
that
ticket.
If the roadway is
Trophies,
compromised
trees.
for emergency vehicles, we'll tow the vehicle. If not, it gets a ticket. So it could sit there all night with a ticket on it.
Is it possible, we're talking about all these things, stipulations and with, if you register your place, assuming we're able to register these short-term rentals, is it possible that if a short-term rental meets all these requirements, they have adequate parking, they don't have tickets for occupancy, they get inspected by the fire department, that the town can publish a list of all the rental units that meet town requirements? As a renter, if I know this place has been inspected by the fire department and that it's meeting all the town things, I'd be more apt to go with that rental. And maybe these owners that have these short-term rentals, if they know they can get approved by the town because they meet all these requirements, maybe that would be
An
an
approved
incentive
rental.
to
That's the
get
permit.
it registered.
I mean, that some communities have, they issue a permit number and that, and the Airbnb advertisement includes that permit number, and that may be the way to do it. Is there any other prohibition? I mean, is there a prohibition against doing what?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
No, that's the way, that's how you identify
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and I
We
think.
could put it on the town website.
City
Well, it's on
certified
their
or city
listing.
approved?
So if they're on
They put
Airbnb
it-
and there's a permit
exactly.
number, they know it's,
They put their permit number on the listing, so, and you could put it on the town website as well, so that people know. I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and that's also the consequence of,
Like
you
permit
know,
numbers?
screwing up, I guess, is
Mhm.
you're losing your
Yeah.
permit,
Yeah.
at least that's how they do it.
Or even just calling it
South-
city
South
approved.
Carolina.
So they would have to advertise their home like sleeps 10, 2 available parking spaces or something like that.
I mean, they would have to.
Yeah.
City approved rental, because
Yeah.
they have
I
they've
don't
done
know if you want to use
everything
a
right.
city
Well,
approved.
you've got city approved.
I know Bob likes the term city approved.
No,
Not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
Put the seal of approval.
There's a condominium in
Liability
Sunshine,
issues, yeah.
Florida right now on the ground.
Yeah.
It has,
City approved.
city approved.
There's some inspectors are on the hot seat
We
too.
will not be doing that.
No.
Okay, the next section is the responsible party and insurance requirements. We talked about that last time. Does anybody have an issue with either of those two? And what we did is put 45 minutes, there's somebody local available to respond to a complaint from a designated town official, and that would probably be somebody in the planning department. And then the other is a comprehensive general liability insurance policy with limits of $1 million. Both of those make sense?
Failure
Yeah.
to respond to complaints, you know, 3
Well-
times, you know, that sort of thing. That's not for us, I guess, that's for.
No, that's gonna be up to them. I mean, it's gotta be somebody.
Yeah.
They have to designate a local person that Preston can call and say, we've gotten 5 noise complaints in the last 24 hours from this unit.
And does town council hammer out these details like age of the person, you know, all the rest of them, and you gotta have some sort of, all those details?
I mean, I don't know, that maybe Preston would have to
Any thoughts on who?
decide who's
it should be?
responsible. I mean,
Preston approved.
No, no, I don't, yeah, I'm not, I wouldn't know how to answer that.
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know what, you know, what responsibility you want to say. I mean, I think it's gonna be up to us to flesh out what that, to the extent that we want a definition. I mean, the theory is, I guess it would be somebody who's in that business locally.
Well, it could even be somebody that's just up here that's responding to those calls for them, you know, a
Right,
permanent
but
resident.
Obviously not a
versus
12-year-old.
Yeah, a permanent resident, an adult, obviously, that would respond to that and say, hey, my
I'll put
neighbor's
an
renting a
adult.
place, they call me next door.
Bare minimum.
That's appropriate versus having a business, yeah.
At first I thought property manager or real estate professional, but you don't really need that.
You don't really need, no, I don't think you need that either. I think you just need somebody who at least knows, I guess the theory is they would have the authority to go in. They would be designated by the owner, so they have at least the authority to go into the unit. Because you'd think they would have to have at least that level of
It needs to
authority.
be in writing too, if they're an agent of the owner, right?
A
And it'd
proxy.
be good to have that on file, you know, so that the town could call somebody if something.
Are they required to be an agent of the owner, though? That's another legal requirement versus a responsible party is one thing. An agent of the owner is a whole different legal.
Yeah, sure, no, we can flesh all
Definition.
that out.
Okay.
A limited agency.
Yeah. So the only thing I had on the comment is that it says that further recommends that all STRs purchase a comp be required to purchase.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what the,
How long are these permits for? If we're going to issue a permit, is it Annual,
It's
biannual?
gonna be annual.
Okay, it doesn't state that, and that's the whole thing, is it was blank, I didn't know what the statement
I
was.
think it's gonna be,
how
I
long
think,
a period
I
of
think
time.
in the regulation it says annually, but I'll make sure we have that in there.
Yeah,
The last area is about this infrastructure cost, and nobody really liked the idea that we came up with. I think everybody feels it's too difficult for us to change the statute, and I think probably we simply would say, I think it's better for us to simply say, the town needs to come up with another way to redirect occupancy tax revenue towards town infrastructure, and leave it up to the town manager and town officials to figure out how they're gonna do that.
because you put that 50% in there, and the first thing they do, boom, hackles go up.
Right. No, no,
Why
I
is
think
it going
we'll
up
just-
50%? What's the
I think we'll just
justification?
delete that and
Yeah.
allow the town to figure out how they're gonna do it, but
Could we revisit the annual question before we go on?
sure.
Is that gonna be, advisable, workable, kind of a pain? Should we do every 3 years? And, if something happens, the whole idea of permitting and tying it to a number in my mind is that we have some sort of way to make things better, like if there's a problem, like we go to the owner. If the owner doesn't do anything about it, there have to be consequences. I think the
Right.
consequence is that eventually you lose your STR permit because you're not being a good steward, you're not being a good neighbor, you're in violation of the law. So if you have a 3-year permit, you've done all this stuff, you've lined it up, and, we're assuming that's work for them and it's work for you, and it's, the planning department. Should they have to do that? Do we want them to renew that every year, or would a 3-year be good if you don't have any violations? If you do have a violation, we revisit it, that sort of thing.
Well, as I understand it right now, the occupancy tax requirement is a one-time requirement, but the fire affidavit is an annual requirement.
Correct.
So at a minimum, they right now are supposed to be doing it annually.
So you're just talking about just signing the affidavit?
No, I'm talking,
Or putting forth the
There's gonna be
affidavit
some-
on a
well,
yearly basis?
I mean, we haven't even talked about what's the permit gonna look like? Because I don't know that that's really within, I think that's more for Preston to come up with a proposal as to what is that permit gonna look like? At a minimum, it's gonna be a certification that they have
Yeah.
complied with everything that's required,
And that
which
should be
includes,
good for,
that's the question.
exactly.
How long?
Yeah, do we
Year,
want them to have to do
5
that?
years?
And do we want Preston and the department have to go through that information and recertify it on a yearly basis, or maybe revisit it every?
Well, but again, given that they have to file the fire affidavit annually,
Which is not, comparing the two though, I feel like the fire affidavit is a lot easier,
Yeah,
right?
but-
Than having to say, all right, this.
but all it is that we have no authority, Preston has no authority to go into the house to verify the information anyway. He never is gonna have that authority.
No, but they still have to process it, that's all I'm thinking. You get 700 applications that you have to process on a yearly basis. I just feel like 3
But all
years
they
might
do is
make
they
it
come
more
in with
workable.
they come in with a checklist and say, we certify that we have done all this.
If there's no inspection or no verification, certainly processing the paperwork wouldn't be that big a deal, but, if we're gonna use it as an enforcement mechanism, there may be,
But we have no right to inspect, right?
Just fine.
You have no legal authority.
we can do a zoning inspection. If we have permitting authority,
Okay.
if the state doesn't remove that, we do
Right.
have the ability to inspect, to verify that, yeah, they do have parking, yes, they do have number of bathrooms that they're stating or whatever.
You have the
that-
legal authority to enter the residence
Based on the permit.
based on the permit?
Basically, they're applying for a permit. and,
Okay.
That gives us the authority to inspect.
Yeah, based on the application of a permit.
Okay,
So if we have a permit, we have the right to inspect based on
okay.
the permit.
Which obviously you wouldn't do in every case, but you would have the authority to spot check as necessary.
I'm not sure. It depends. If it's
Yeah, reasonable
we're gonna take, if they're signing an affidavit and they're saying,
Right.
yes, we're and it's notarized, and we're complying with, if we don't have complaints, then maybe that's something we can just take it and say, here's your, pay your annual fee, here's your permit, you're good for another year. Maybe if there's complaints, I don't know. And it really depends on what you get, or council ends up, what, I know there's a lot of things up in the air, so it kind of depends on all that as well.
First, I think if the town issues a permit, that's the point you possibly have the right to enter to do an inspection,
Right,
a renewal.
probably not.
You do not have the right to enter.
So it'd just be the initial. What's your feeling on?
Unless you had it expire every year.
Well, that's what, I mean, it would be,
But in your proposal, it expires on the second, or transfer of ownership.
Of ownership,
So I
yeah.
kind of took it as it was, you complied.
what's your feeling on annual lifetime transfer of ownership?
Transfer of ownership.
Okay.
So once in compliance, you're in compliance unless there's a complaint or a transfer of ownership.
Well, you still have to supply the annual affidavit.
Right.
Safety. So other than safety, what government,
I'm with you.
purpose would we have to enter your home and check to see if you're still in
Still,
compliance?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay. Okay, so where we stand, I think, is I will try to make these changes and send a new draft out to y'all and see if we can try to get it approved by the July meeting.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Looking at the, oh gosh, let me find out what page we're on.
Are you in the actual regulation?
Yes, the
Okay.
actual regs. Let me find out where I had a question, the sworn compliance. Basically, the sworn compliance verification form, where it says the owner attesting that the property owners within 100 feet of the STR were notified of the intended STR use.
Right, that was one of the,
And that was my question, is this is administrative overreach? Person's allowed to do with the home as they're wanting to. Is it going to be if somebody next door says that I don't want an STR next to me, you can't rent your unit out, that the city's going to stand on that? What is the,
It's just notice.
is it?
There's no,
So what's the reason for notification of the people though? That's my question. What's the support for that? The city just arbitrarily decided that the neighbors needed to be informed and then you had to
I
certify
think we probably
it?
scrap, I think we could probably scrap that.
which,
first.
yeah, I'm looking for it right now. Where is, oh, there it is, right here, number 2.
Yeah,
I
no,
thought that was good because the neighbors would then have the contact of the agent or whoever was the
That's good.
24 hours.
Yeah.
So that's what I
Maybe
read
just-
into that.
But
Maybe
if
we
you
just
put
say
that
that-
there, then you can do that. But the question is that you're providing, it says the sworn statement shall include a list of names and addresses, property owners should receive the notice. What notice? What's the notice going to include? The notice shall include address, proposal, statement the owner is applying for an STR. Is this for the person to have a chance to
It seems,
argue against that?
it seems boilerplate, and it also seems like you're just telling your neighbor, hey, I'm gonna be doing a short-term rental, if there's a problem, get in touch with the agent, which, to Sandy's point, all you gotta do is notify them of who the agent is. I think that's the answer. So once you pick your agent, you just tell your neighbor that you have an agent. That implies that you're doing an STR. It doesn't give them any right to fight it or anything. You're just telling them, we've got an agent, if you got a problem, call the agent.
And I think that's the purpose of it.
And that, I'm just saying what my read of it,
Okay.
it almost looks like it's a city requirement that you have to have the sworn statement that these things have been there, and then the part comes off of it. If you don't have that, then because you left off the street address or name of the contact was changed or something like that, it's a reason for revocation. And so that's the only thing is, because it says the ground for denial is incomplete application or didn't meet a specified standard, but we're requiring all sorts of other information.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. This is boilerplate, so this
Yeah.
came from the.
And that's the only thing I'm looking at is, again, having worked government for my entire career, and seeing it, is that sometimes as government, we tend to sit here and think of one area of oversight, but we also forget to turn around and take the other side of the fence and be devil's advocates and stand back and say, okay, I'm an owner. Why do I gotta send out 8 of these things? Because in my property, down below, I've got 3 people that were 100 feet of my property. On the back side of me, on the top side, I've got 3 people on either side of me. I got 3 people across, and now I've got 12 people that I have to notify that I'm doing an STR.
Well, maybe the answer is to have well, shouldn't the town have a list of the agents
Yeah.
anyways?
You just
Yeah.
call,
I mean,
call
for
the
the
town if you have
police.
an issue.
Yeah, for the police, if nothing else, to have an agent, for responses to short-term rental complaints. So if the town has a list and it's publicly discoverable, then
Yeah.
anyone can look at it. That way you won't have to notice all 8 of your neighbors.
So I mean, is the sense you want to pull
You
that
may or
out?
may not even.
It was just a question, I wasn't,
Okay.
I was just bringing that up,
That's a good
is this
point.
admin overreach, and that's the
Yeah,
only
I mean, this
question I
one,
put.
this came, the draft came, it's an amended version of what the Institute of Government.
Okay.
Overreach or not, it's
provides
just a
us.
pain.
Yes, and that's what I was looking at, because 100 feet, well, I back up to property, and the lot behind me is only 80 feet wide, so now I've got 3 neighbors down, myself having to do all that stuff, I'm going, oh my gosh, why do I gotta do that? And how do I prove that I have sent that to them? Do I have to use certified mail? I mean, that's the issue that I came down to. Oh, I tacked it on their door, I nailed it to their door, I don't know. But, that was the only question I asked and that was my only question.
I mean, I like to say, it doesn't really matter to me. Is there a sense you think it's just overreach if we have another way to, the issue is.
Is it one more thing that they need to do that they don't, is it one more thing that the city's requiring them to do that is not necessary? That's the question.
If there's another way to get the information.
Yes.
They would have to
If
call.
they can call, if there's a database that they can
Which
just
the town
call the
will
town
have. We should have a
and
database.
just access it, I think
Okay.
that's,
All right, well, let's strike through it then, and let's eliminate that requirement.
What section?
That is on page 12 of 19.
Yeah, I was trying to find it, I had my copy and I didn't have this copy, so. Mine
Obviously, it
didn't
doesn't
have page
exist in
numbers.
the no permit version because
Yeah.
no permit's required. So, yeah, and I'll modify that.
I think that's the one.
So basically, we're just scrapping that for
Yeah.
a repository. of-
Yep. And the town, I mean, with the assumption that the town will have a listing of the responsible parties, which is really the key.
well, that makes it easier. I'm buying a home and I want to know if I'm surrounded by short-term rentals,
Right.
that I have one place I can go to find that
To find out.
information.
And that'll be, and Preston will be the repository of that information.
The only other thing I had was page 15. Just need to change the numbers under the, it starts with 8, 9, 10.
Oh, yeah.
Need to change
How
those
that-
over to 1,
yep.
2, 3, 4
Yep.
again.
No problem. That's easy enough to do. Don't know
Those
how
are just
that
minor
happened.
edits.
I mean, now that I'm looking at this list that you're calling attention to, all that stuff should be publicly discoverable. I mean, whether or not it's gonna be tied to a permit number, and we'll have all that information in-house, but I think we should all be able to find this stuff, honestly.
To an
because
extent, yes, I can agree that a maximum allowable for the property, again, that's up to the city, whatever the
Right,
city's
but once
done.
that's decided upon,
Yeah.
we can tell people that, this is what your neighbor has and what they do with their house and how many people, additionally have in there. And who to call if there's a problem.
And maybe just saying that it's informational to the people, that way it doesn't sound or give the impression that this is something that they have the right to say no to.
Sure.
Provide informational.
Okay, any other change? Anybody else have any other changes, comments, suggestions?
Thanks for your work on this, Service. I know
Yep.
this is a lot.
Yeah.
No problem. Let me,
And on your Beach Mountain rules and guidelines, my questions, firemen are not permitted at any time,
Well, that's why I like-
prohibited.
I like Sandy's version
Yeah.
better.
I hadn't seen that completely.
That's why I said-
Firearms are prohibited, fireworks are prohibited, firing off, that's standard.
Yeah. Hers is more user-friendly.
I hadn't seen,
And it's pretty.
I just saw it before and I didn't get it printed out,
It's
sorry.
aesthetically pleasing.
Aesthetically pleasing.
Is that the proper government
I love it.
ease?
Okay, any other, Preston, anything else we need to deal with?
No, I don't believe so.
Our next meeting is the last Tuesday in July.
It should be the 27th.
27th?
I just looked it up.
That's what it says.
Because if I don't write it down,
Oh, yeah, there it
Says
is,
on
right
the
there.
bottom
July
right there.
20th. It says it on the agenda?
well, I have to put it here.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be in this Bible.
I'm retired.
All right, so
I sit on way too many boards not to write things down.
we we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I used to sit on 3 major boards.
If anyone's looking for volunteer opportunities, I'd love to see you at the hog roast around 3 o'clock. The hog roast on Sunday. I'll see you.
I'll be there scooping.
Thank you so much.